Welcome to CONEXEC, a podcast for construction executives. I'm here in the offices of HGC Construction, and I'm here with Joe Frecker. Okay, is that close enough?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Jacob Reeves. Known Jacob Reeves for some time, and so probably about 10 years. We know it for about 10 years. So before we start, why don't you guys both kind of tell me about yourself? Kind of tell me your background, your story, where you grew up. Take us from the beginning. So go ahead, Joe.
I'm Joe. My background is an education in construction management, undergrad from the University of Cincinnati in 1994. And with 25 years plus in the construction industry, I've really kind of seen it from all angles. As a subcontractor, a general contractor, construction manager, developer, and spent the last almost 10 years as a senior construction manager at Xavier University as more like an owner's rep and overseeing general contracting for the university. I've been here at HGC Construction for almost 2 years now as a project executive and loved every moment of it.
So your role, what is your role exactly as a project executive? Because I know it varies from company to company.
Mm-hmm. As a project executive here, we're managing teams of people, project managers, senior project managers, superintendents, project engineers, managing those teams of people to manage projects.
Mm-hmm. Jacob, I know you, but our listeners don't know you, so I knew it's going to start out as you grew up in the backwoods of Kentucky. I know it's going to start there, and then go ahead.
Yeah, so Jacob Reeves, I'm a senior project manager here at HGC Construction. Came on board in the spring of 2018, so coming up on my 2-year anniversary. Scott, as you know, I was a student at Eastern Kentucky University. I picked up a bachelor's in construction management there and went on to pick up a master's degree from EKU as well. Worked for a CM firm, a small to medium-sized family-owned CM firm for nearly 10 years, and was doing a lot of traveling, a lot of commuting, a lot of windshield time spent on the road and away from family. So as my family started to grow, I felt the need to find something a little closer to home, and always knew I wanted to come to work for HGC. I was familiar with them. At the time, young family, they used to do a lot of stuff at the Cincinnati Zoo, so I was familiar with them. They are also a family-owned third-generation business, so that spoke to me as well, as where my past was with a family-owned business. But they were a very large, self-performing general contracting, which was something that was new to me, but something that excited me. So when I made the decision to make a move, I wanted to make a move, a drastic move. So that's how I ended up here, and loved it ever since.
So back up and tell me about the company altogether. So HGC is a company, and I'm kind of out of my neck of the woods. Once you cross that Kentucky line, you don't know anything. But I'm not familiar with HGC. Some of our clients may not, or some of our listeners may not be familiar. So you said it was a family-based business. Can you kind of go back in the history, where it started, and kind of how it grew?
Sure. Yeah, HGC was founded in 1931 by Richard J. Huseman, and his motto was "Do the job right. If it's not done right, then do it again." And he passed the company on. Richard did, to his son Ray, and Ray passed the company on to his son Mike. Mike is the current president of the company.
That's pretty phenomenal. Most companies you don't see go through the third generation. Like Judy Construction, for example, they look at the tax. The tax breaks from second to third generation are huge, because that normally doesn't occur. But that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's always the...
or to get your kids to be interested in the business is the tough one. So anyhow, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
It's all right. There's always the myth of the third generation curse that,
yes,
that a company can't make it through 3 generations. But Mike has done quite the opposite. He has completely grown the company to more than double the size of it was when his father ran it. So today, HGC Construction is part of the HGC group of companies. Mm-hmm. So as a group of companies, we have HGC Construction, SRG, Structural Systems Repair Group. We also have Stanton Millworks, an architectural and cabinet company.
Were those
across the street here.
organically grown companies?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
And one that we just recently acquired, Stewart Ironworks. So that was an acquisition. That was not a grown in-house company. But together, throughout all four of those companies, we employed about 350 people.
Was there any rhyme or reason why why HGC as a company grew those two, or was it just kind of happened?
It was pretty natural. We had our own self-perform folks that did mostly rough carpentry, among other things. But in dealing with renovations and complex renovations and intricate repairs and structural items, sprang SSRG. And in addition to being our own self-performing general contractor, we found that the offspring of SSRG allows them to go work for a number of different people and different clients in different areas. They'll travel a little more outwards of Cincinnati regionally than we will, but Stanton Millworks as well was kind of organically grown from the need of, hey, here's something that we can manufacture that our self-performed forces can install, and which grew into them hiring their own installers and stuff like that as well. And then Stewart Ironworks just seemed to kind of fit as an acquisition because they're an even older company than HGC has been. So they've got a lot of history and ability to have.
Did that just happen,
there.
like recently, or?
Back before the end of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe November.
Yeah, fourth quarter last year.
Well, I think it's interesting. Like the pieces you guys self-perform are not typical. A lot of people who like, hey, I do wastewater treatment plants, so we'll self-perform concrete. So that's why I asked that question about, hey, were they grown out of it or whatever? But a millwork doesn't seem to be the one that that generally kind of grows into being a general contractor. But
well, to add to what Joe was saying about renovations, a bulk of our work, and really when we thrived and grew substantially, was during historical renovation work, which we still do a lot of.
Oh, that makes sense.
And that's where the need for an SSRG and a Stewart Ironworks made sense, because we were constantly outsourcing, a wrought iron fence or some miscellaneous metals, or we might needed a, structural beam or a handful of structural beams, but not necessarily the need for a full-blown, steel subcontractor. So having SSRG and Stewart Ironworks, and even Stanton for that matter, being able to have all those capabilities in-house really helps us and really expedites our projects. So,
Jacob, what is the core focus of HGC? What is there an industry? Is it a type of project, or?
In being here just shy of 2 years, I would like to think that we'll take on anything initially. We're continuing to grow and expand in other markets. Certainly, we pride ourselves on the ability to do complex and historical renovations, as Joe has touched on, but we also do a lot of work that's new construction out of the ground. Joe can elaborate more on that, but my answer would be that we kind of take on anything initially, and if it makes sense, why not?
I don't know if it makes sense to say, but our core focus is to be diverse. To be diverse enough and nimble enough to do a bunch of different works in a bunch of different markets in a bunch of different regions. And we are looking to grow, but I think it's got to be a controlled growth and a focused growth. And if it's geographically, maybe it's to a new city where a client takes us to. That we're not just going to try and just go and jump into another city just to be there. It's got to be a calculated and focused.
And that's interesting. I see a lot of people talk about like, hey, my client brought me here, So you do a good job for a client. Last week I had on Don Tucker, who they do churches, and a lot of he just has moved place to place with different churches as pastors move from place to place and different items like that. So that's interesting. Probably very valuable to you guys in the very near future if truly an a market, if the market retracts a little bit. I mean, obviously we've had one of the greatest economic times of my life, so if that changes, that's going to obviously, be in your benefit because you guys can do diverse things. So, is there something you guys don't do?
We're not into so much the medical market. There's other guys that seem to specialize in that have a niche into that market that we really haven't been able to crack so deep. I mean, we'll do a medical office building. We're not afraid of med gases or anything complex, to be honest with you. But we just haven't been able to thrive in that market.
And big working with large organizations there to have large needs. So have you guys had any looking as a business, what significant events have you had that's kind of shaped the model that you guys have today?
Well, we actually grew in the last recession, 08, 09, when a lot of the smaller companies are folding up. Our medium to large size company that I would describe us as had enough diversity and enough varying types of projects and clients that was actually able to help us grow in the last recession, and that's in a mix of public and private work. We need to be able to forecast market changes and enough to be nimble to step into different areas, whether that's industrial or commercial warehouses or complex renovations. There's not too much that we're afraid of.
When you guys have gone from generation to generation, I know you guys haven't been here through that, but have you heard from the owner about how different? I mean, every company takes on the characteristics of the owner. If it's owned by an owner, there's some characteristics, or does it pretty much remain kind of stable, like your core values and your mission and all that items? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start with the mission statement. At HGC, we strive to be the backstop where memories are made and beginnings are born. And I think to expand on that a little bit, we solve complex problems quickly and accurately. We have vast experience in projects in all scopes and sizes to deliver tight turnarounds and hard deadlines, whether it's from like opening day to the first day of school. We'll do state-of-the-art fulfillment stations, complex renovations, innovative zoological and industrial structures. We work really across all markets. Our foundation was built on solid relationships in both public and private clients, and they repeatedly rely on us and our broad expertise and experience to make their visions a reality. Our commitment to our clients really never ends, and we stand behind our work and get the job done right every time. And doing so has been a part of HGC's culture since it started 89 years ago. And I think that's what, the size we are, we haven't lost that personal touch or that attitude of the personality of the owner. I think everybody here truly embraces the culture. When you're looking to expand and hire on new employees, you obviously want the right experience, but you also want the right fit. You want the right personality. You want the right person who's going to bring the same personal touch that is emanated all the way down from the president of the company.
What talk about characteristics of the company. I'm interested when I walk in your guys' door. By the way, I love your guys' office. It is if you've never been to their office, you need to walk through because it's really interesting. I like the fact that, you have different materials everywhere, and it just, you work in a construction company when you walk in this office, in a good way, not a bad way. But when you talk about like, where was I going there? When you talk about the size of your company and like the characteristics, you got different organizations. Can you kind of quantify that for me a little bit? What does that look like people-wise, revenue-wise? By walking in your door, you guys look like a pretty significant general contractor. Can you kind of break that down for me?
Yeah, we're doing about $160 million in revenue last year in 2019. Projected to do the same or better, and the majority of that, $120 120, 130 of that is HGC Construction.
Mm-hmm.
So we're the mainstay of the group of companies. And yeah, always looking to grow.
And so that's the entire group, about 160 million or so for the entire group. So yeah, you guys are not a small company anymore. So
Right.
What about people-wise, including with the self? And then it's going to be misleading because you guys have self-perform too. So it's kind of like, if you're a true CM and you have 50 employees, that's a different model than maybe that you guys have. So can you kind of break that down for me a little bit, people-wise?
There's probably 100 employees here in our office,
Mm-hmm.
and that entails office people for HGC Construction as well as the shared services folks. So all 4 companies share human resources, IT, accounting, departments like that, so that we don't have to have individual
Absolutely, yeah. Efficiency
ITs
built in.
Yeah. And then our field workforce is probably 150 people. Does that sound right?
I would say more. I think SSRG alone is close to 100. I would say with a group of companies, Stanton and Stewart Ironworks included, I would say there's probably 250 or so carpenters.
And being based on the location, I take it you guys are union?
We're not.
We are not union, really?
Open shop. Yeah.
Okay, so even with the steel side, huh?
Mhm.
Wow. So I mean, I'm just only reason I say I'm surprised is just because you're in Cincinnati, and usually steel inherently is union based.
Well, clarify. I mean, we're not out erecting structural steel
Understood.
framing.
We're not doing high rise.
Yeah.
Okay.
SSRG
Okay.
has in-house steel capabilities that basically fall under their stabilization
Okay, I
and
got you.
restoration
I got you.
umbrella.
Is there any specific reason you guys just always been open shop? Is that
Mhm.
been the issue? Because I know there's some companies out there like Messer, for example. They were union at one time and then they went away from union, back and forth. So that's a touchy issue, and I won't even go there.
So we have a lot of great valued union subcontractors, and there's certain trades that will always be union, like the sprinkler fitters and
Yes.
stuff like that.
Yes.
They do a fantastic job for us.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that I worked in Chicago for a period of time, and when we're working in Chicago, that you don't have a choice. Everybody's union.
Right.
But what I realize is that sometimes people get bad raps on both sides of the fence. Was there any specific game-changing event that the company had that really made it who you guys are today? Was it breaking the companies out into different companies and making HGC a group of companies? Was that a game-changing event, or was there anything else that was really changed what you guys do today?
I think the closest thing that I would say to game changing for us, and it's not really a specific event, but maybe a series of events that led us to working in Over the Rhine, which is a neighborhood just north of downtown Cincinnati that has had a recent revitalization focus by a number of different developers, but we were one of the first ones that was able to go down into Over the Rhine and take an old, dilapidated historical building and turn it into something nice, whether that's residential apartments or homes or commercial spaces or a combination of the two. I think the first couple of those we did really started to spring that revitalization of Over the Rhine and has really changed the face and the attitude of downtown Cincinnati. Has sparked a revitalization within downtown proper. And so now we're in downtown proper, turning office buildings into hotels or backwards or
And what I think is interesting about your answer, and it kind of shows what kind of who you guys are, is you're focusing more on your client and what you do and how that changes you rather than the other way around. Most people talk about, oh, well, I had this event that happened in my company and it changed the company, and you're more like, hey, our clients need this, so this is what we did. And I think that's pretty significant. So kudos to you guys. Do you guys have any firmly lay down plans for the next 5 or 10 years? And if you do, can you share those?
Be nimble. We are looking to grow, but
Like
you
everybody,
say,
yeah, yeah.
it's got to be a sensible and focused and calculated growth. I think the best way to grow is through repeat clients, and whether or not they expand within the city of Cincinnati or outside of the city of Cincinnati or wherever. I think we're willing to take on new clients, do repeat work for clients, and to grow our company in numbers and dollar volume and in region, wherever that might take us.
Well, and I work with a lot of business coaches or different people. We do analytics too, business analytics. And one of the things I thought was interesting. Someone said once, and he actually was an executive with $1 billion company, so he's a pretty sharp guy. And he said, a company is a tree. It grows or dies. It doesn't stay the same. So it's like if you're not growing, then you're either pruning or you're dying, in one way or the other. So I've never sat down with somebody saying, "Oh yeah, we don't plan to grow," or we plan to stay the same. So what has HGC as a company done to kind of, obviously everybody has a growth plan. What has HGC done? I mean, obviously last few years they brought you guys on board. What are some of the other things that they've done? They acquired the steel company, right? Is there anything else that they're doing? You guys are doing to kind of prepare for that growth?
Yeah, I think it starts with continually analyzing and looking at the things you're doing right now, and make sure you're doing them well. If there's things that need polished up as far as policies and procedures, and especially with bringing on new employees and training and stuff like that, you want to make sure that what you're doing well, you continue to do well and don't lose that. But also be open-minded and always have that continuous learning mentality to want to take on new adventures as far as, hey, let's adopt the lean construction principles in planning and scheduling and implementation in construction. And we've been doing that for better than a year now, and seen some good results there, which are also hard to maintain. So we've seen some struggles in trying to polish what we do now and taking on new things, but we want to, like I mentioned, just have that mentality of continuous improvement.
Now leaning back on your own experience, and I'll start with Jacob here because I think I'm ignoring him, but he deserves to be ignored. I mean, I agree. I think your wife would agree with that. So. Leaning back on like where you kind of came from and what you were able to kind of bring with you, you guys have a unique skill set, being that you guys have both worked for general contractors, but you've worked as owners reps too, which I think is really interesting. So can you? I'll let you go first, Jacob, and then I'll let you go, Joe. What do you bring to what have you brought to the table? I think to HGC.
Well, before I answer that question, Scott, I do want to jump back real quick on the growth that Joe was hitting on. It being here for nearly 2 years, we've definitely grown as a company in the 2 years that I've been here. A lot of that growth is growth within. So before you just go out and acquire new project managers or new superintendents or new carpenters, you got to grow your people within. And one thing that the group of companies, HGC, does particularly well is to grow their employees. So our director, vice president of human resources, actually has a book that's published on leadership and the growth of leadership and the difference between leadership and management. And they actually, at no cost to the employee here at the company, they offer what's called the Leadership Academy. And it's it's about an 8-month long. We meet once to twice a month for several hours, of which Joe and I are both recent graduates of back in the fall of 2019. So just to add to what Joe was saying, the growth, it is planned, it's calculated, but they make sure that they grow their employees from within, make sure it's a well-oiled machine before they bring in outside folks. And I really value the commitment that they make to us every day here at HGC.
Yeah, we have another project executive here, Bill Brombach. who's been here 20 years and started as a co-op,
Oh wow.
and
Yeah.
he's gone all the way to project executive.
Wow. Well, it's funny that most companies don't see the value. Like when you throw out leadership, most companies are like, that's not that important, or it's yeah, it's important, but we're worried about this or that, but in reality, if you can hone in leadership, then all the other things get taken care of. It's pretty incredible. So now that Jacob totally led the discussion in a different way, now I'm going to go back to what did you bring to HGC with your past experience? You think that would be helpful to like your clients or HGC as a company?
So prior to coming here, I worked for a small to medium-sized construction management firm that largely done public plan and spec work, of which HGC, dabbles in, but that is not the bread and butter of the organization. So I was able to bring the public knowledge, the plan and spec knowledge, the new construction with mass site work and concrete work and masonry work and structural steel work, really the multi-million new construction projects, that experience to HGC. Not that they don't do that and that they weren't currently doing that, but that was my strong suit certainly, and that I've been able to help grow this market here. We just finished a project that was a large design build project up in Warren County. There was a courthouse that I've done several number of courthouses in my past, and that job went great for all parties involved. So I've been able to help in that aspect.
Well, both of you guys, the fact that you guys have both come to some public money, there's a certain level of discipline that you develop as construction manager. If you ever work, it's kind of like working as a home builder, and I'm not putting down home builders here, but there is a lack of discipline if you don't come from certain backgrounds. And I'm a licensed home builder, and I can tell you, they kind of just they don't follow the construction management disciplines you learn, like creating a schedule, a realistic schedule, and updating it regularly. So, Joe, kind of leading back with my question to Jacob, can you kind of talk about what you bring to the table that has helped HGC as a company?
In one word, it's hard to describe, but it might be perspective. I think that the different ways that I've been through construction has allowed me to see it from a lot of different angles, which is really understanding the expectations of a subcontractor or the expectations of a general contractor, or the expectations of an owner. If you can understand all of those expectations up and down the chain, I think there's less chance for stumbling and less chance for mistakes and less chance for error. And if you don't know the expectations of a certain new client, you need to define those. Get it out on the table up front and say at the beginning of a project, what's going to make this a success for you at the end of the project? Obviously, schedule and budget and safety and all of those things are going to be important to us, that are a kind of a given to be important for a client. But I think if you can find that other magical item that's a need of theirs that might not have surfaced unless you asked, that they might not be 100% satisfied at the end of the project. And we really want to strive for 100% client satisfaction.
And that's one thing that's broken construction more than anything is customer service. I mean, that's my opinion, but customer service is something that's been broken in our industry for a long time.
Right.
But it seems to me that more people are getting that because, 80% of my work as ACE Consulting comes from repeat clients. So, and I'm sure you guys have real high numbers relative to that too. So it makes sense to make customers happy and treat them like, you go buy a car, you want to be treated a certain way. So, and a building costs a lot more than a car, so.
Yeah, it's pretty unique in that the mindset of the company, regardless of which of the four you're talking about, is to be people pleasers. And we don't like to present a potential problem to a client without at least one solution, if not multiple solutions. Mm-hmm. It's never, this is on fire, what do we do? It's, this is on fire, here are a couple of ways to put it out.
Because you're going to have problems. That's a reality. We work in construction. never had a job that didn't have problems. Either I'm a bad project manager or that's just the way construction is. So I'm going to lean a little bit on your guys' your personal successes and failures because I think we learn a lot from those. And hearing the stories has always intrigued me. If you had to list your 5 biggest failures, or you don't have to give me 5, you can just give me a couple, and your 5 biggest successes, what would those be personally? And you could share if it is in a company too, So I'll let you guys both share those.
I'll go with one, failure from work was not being able to predict the weather. And to elaborate on that, at Duke Realty, we were constructing a pretty large warehouse, about 15 acres under roof.
Oh, wow.
And so it was close to 1 million square feet. And right about the time that the steel was going up and erecting precast panels around the perimeter of this building, it was a wet January followed by a deep freeze. And so we had a 15-acre slab that couldn't be poured. And we progressed with roofing over top of that and tried to contain it and tried to heat it from within. And we ended up spending close to $1 million to cement stabilize that subgrade.
Oh, wow.
That had gotten wet and deep frozen in order to maintain schedule. Because the liquidated damages were so severe that if we didn't make it, it was going to cost us a lot more than that $1 million it took to correct that situation. That was a huge lesson learned for me in my career. Now, is it a failure because I couldn't predict the weather? I don't know. I think the failure would have been a more costly way out of it. But it's just something that's happened to me throughout the course of construction that, like you say, it's all in the stories, right?
Yes.
That you always got to be mindful of the weather, whether or not it's just going to rain tomorrow or whether or not there's a long forecasted deep freeze, which, we sit here on January 30th. We've had a mild winter to date here in late 19 and early 20.
Now you said it. Somebody better knock on wood, But
failure to predict the weather.
And what I think is interesting about, and the reason I asked the question about failure, some people don't like that word, but I personally believe you learn more from failure than you do from success. And just because when you make a mistake once, if you're smart, you'll never make it again, or try your best not to make it again. So what about successes?
I've had a number of different successes, in a career, being able to kind of come through the industry from the bottom up, I think has been my greatest success thing, but more than that, having the mindset of being a continuous learner. After 20 years in the industry, I decided to go back to school for a master's in business, and got that in 2016 at Xavier. And through the Leadership Academy here at HGC and any learning lean construction, I think as long as you have that mindset of continuous improvement, that not that I'm never going to be good enough, but I always want to strive to do more.
Absolutely.
I think is the biggest success that I would have.
What about you, Jacob? I got plenty of failures. No, I just
Yeah.
Assignment 4 in scheduling. No, I just go ahead, Jacob.
In life, hindsight's 20/20, and that's can't be more true than in construction.
My wife points that out to me all the time. So
yeah, I'm always wrong in her eyes, but it's hard on the spot to pinpoint one great failure. What comes to mind to me is recurring failure. And what I mean by that is how I started with hindsight's 20/20. You always, in construction, get towards the end of a project, and I wish I would have done this differently. Whether that was documenting the weather days, to go back to Joe's point, and being able to claim those weather days to get a contract extension. Or was it a safety issue? Was it a quality issue? Did you follow, reading your contract, reading your specs? What do you owe to the client downstream? And I think, there's always a takeaway from every project, whether the project itself was a success or maybe wasn't a success. There's always things you look back and wish you would have done differently. And for me, I guess umbrella speaking would be documentation. You know, given every item at the time the importance that it needs, rather than take light of it or sweep it under the rug, because chances are that it will come back out in a greater force than before. So always documenting, staying on top of it, managing, not taking on more than you can manage that's within your control. Early on, when fresh out of college, I had a hard time saying no, and I found myself overworked and overwhelmed, and things would slip through the crack occasionally. So as I've gotten older and more experienced, it's more about quality than quantity, and sometimes you do have to tell, whether it be internally or a client or something downstream, if you can't take something else.
And that's hard when you're good at something. People will, I always say you're always rewarded with more work if you do your job well. And I, it's. So I look at somebody like you, Jacob, and I said, I know if I gave you a task or Joe gave you a task, you're going to run that in the ground, and we're going to reward you with more tasks. And I'm sure you feel that way,
The more you do, the more you get.
Yeah, absolutely. So you didn't say about successes.
Personally, success for me would be my family. I have a wonderful wife. I have a 4-year-old son. I have a soon-to-be 2-year-old son. And we literally, any moment now, are expecting the birth of our baby girl. So personally, for me, my biggest success is my family. And being everything that I can be for them as a husband and a father. Professionally, my career, graduated high school with honors, graduated college with honors, was encouraged by you yourself to go back and pursue my master's degree. I was the second person to receive the master's degree in the program at EKU. And then from there, not stopping, just continuing to get as many applicable and relevant certifications as possible. So I went on in college. Part of the curriculum was passing the level 1 AIC exam, and I took it a step further after college to pass the level 2 AIC exam and to become LEED certified and to get my OSHA 30 and just to stay up to date. Three of us sitting here at the table know that construction industry probably changes more rapidly than any other industry. It touches all aspects of IT and project software, technology, means and methods, materials are constantly evolving and changing. So it's not something where you can graduate college, you get your piece of paper and frame it and hang it on the wall, and then you just pass time until you get to retirement. It's something that if you don't continually stay up to date and current on the technology and means and methods, that you'll quickly fall behind. It doesn't.
And you know what? It doesn't seem like enough people acknowledge that, because it seems like education is kind of like, especially in our industry, it's kind of like, it used to be, and Joe, I don't know how old you are, but I take it you're about my age, and based on how you look, maybe older, because I look probably a little younger, but when we grew up, you didn't need a college education to go into project management. It was just, you didn't need it, and nowadays you can't do that. That's not the way it is. And now field staff are starting to, you never saw someone that was degreed in engineering or construction management, that unless it was a really large job that was, in the field, but now it's pretty commonplace.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying I'm sure we're all familiar with: fake it until you make it.
Yes.
You can't do that in this industry. You can tell yourself you're a PM. You might be able to sell yourself as a PM, but it doesn't take long at all to find out whether or not you are, in fact, or a carpenter for that matter. We see it all the time. Someone will come in and say they're a superintendent and that they have 20 years experience, and then you throw them on a job and it doesn't take long at all to see that
not at all.
They're not even treading water; they're sinking. So this industry, you have to stay current. You got to continue your education. You got to go to the trainings and the seminars and stay up to date, and you're only benefiting yourself and your career.
Going back to what you were talking about with failures, is many organizations don't do that. Those post-mortem reviews. They kind of said, "Hey, man, we made all these mistakes. We know we made them. We don't know we need to go back and revisit them. Because it's painful." But I know because when I built U.S. embassies overseas, that was one thing that we did, and it was kind of nice because you got everybody in the room. Number one, it was a sense of accountability because everybody knew they had to come in a room and they had to answer for the mistakes or the successes they had, which was a good thing. The other one is we identified, hey, there was a problem. But how are we going to fix that? And have everybody from the project team there, and that's because how do you learn if you don't ever go back and and revisit those?
It's funny you bring that up, post-mortem. When I started HGC, that's what we called them. And Mike Huseman actually is the one that changed the terminology. I mean, there's something post-mortem that just has a negative connotation.
It does.
So Mike took a military approach. And in the military, which you're a military man, you always have a debrief after a mission.
That's true.
So we now call them debriefs when a project ends because we don't hone in or focus on the negative, but we also like to shine light on the positives of the project. So it's interesting that you bring that terminology up.
Well, that's good that you guys do because, like everybody else is saying, I'm moving at the speed of light, so we don't have a chance to take a step back for a minute and figure out, hey, let's don't make these mistakes again. But so I move on to one of my favorite parts. Go ahead. Did you have something you want to add to that, Joe?
Actually, yeah. Individual project debriefs with the project teams. We've also morphed that into more of a let's share lessons learned at a quarterly operations meeting with everybody in the company to say, hey, there's new restrictions with downtown street closures that everybody ought to be aware of. This hurt us. We lost 2 weeks on our job. Want everybody else to learn from that so that it doesn't happen on another project. Or something with a subcontractor or something with an owner or something with a change order. What was your lesson learned that you could share so that somebody else in the company doesn't make that same mistake?
When we go back to my embassy days, because of the fact that they was so widespread, I mean, we'd have 5 to 7 embassies under construction at any point, and then we'd find an issue on this job, and then we got to the point where we're like, okay, if we have an issue on this job, how do we share that in an immediate fashion? And one of the guys in the company was a former Navy guy, and which is the best military service, as you guys very well know. So not that I'm biased in any way, but they in the naval aviation, when there's a problem with a jet, they send a bulletin out to everybody, and they say, "Hey, here's a problem. Be aware of it." And so we started. I forget what they called that, but we started doing that when we had an issue. Because the facilities were very common, there's a common design, but there's also common working with the agency we were working with. We would push that out to everybody immediately, and we would record them for a review, but we'd immediately push that out. And I couldn't tell you how many times we saved money and time just by immediately saying, hey, this is an issue, And nowadays with technology, it's so easy. I just had email that at that time. Now, like for my company, I'll video record myself, and because we have 50 people all across the United States and overseas, and then we text them the video, so right on their phone, they can immediately get it. So it's pretty incredible. So we're getting to one of my favorite parts, and second to the last parts, and that is about advice. And what kind of personal advice would you give somebody who is seeking a career at a senior level within construction, as a project executive, as some type of executive within construction companies? What advice would you give to that person? Because we have a group of people that are not just construction executives that are listening. They have a lot of young people that are mid-career people. What would you say would be some advice you would give? And I'll lean that on both of you guys.
For me, and I kind of touched on it earlier, it's you have to do something to set yourself apart. You said earlier, you didn't have to have a college degree to get into construction and to work your way up to project manager. Now you got to have a college degree to get your foot in the door. But guess what? There's a million applicants. what do you do to set yourself differently? And then once you're in the door as a project engineer or a project manager or a senior project manager, you have to raise the bar. You continually have to do something differently to set yourself in a whole different realm of your competition, to be noticed, to be recognized. So I would lead towards continuing improvement, whether that's picking up some certifications that are applicable to the industry you're in, or continue your education. If you don't have your master's degree, work towards it, or your PhD. Just never stop honing your skill set.
What do you think, Joe?
Scott, I'd say as advice to someone else looking to become an executive, I think there's a certain analyzation and planning strategy that you need to have as your primary focus. And whether that's a small problem you're dealing with, whether that's an entire project you're dealing with, or whether that's a client that you're dealing with, I think if you have this, analyze the situation, determine what your end objective is, determine what steps are going to help take you there to get there, and then implementing that strategy, whether that's on your problem or your project or your client. I think that sort of mindset of what's my end game and how do I get there would be my advice to somebody else, to whether that's analyzing a small problem or a big issue,
What's interesting,
or career.
What's interesting about what you say is that I think a lot of times we get, construction is filled with a lot of testosterone, and sometimes we lose sight of the ultimate objective. And sometimes the best thing you can do is shut up, or the best thing you can do is just listen. You listen, and sometimes we get caught up in the fact, well, I want to be right, and maybe not you, Joe, because you're a nice guy, but for me, I get caught up in that sometimes, but learn that. I always think that's an interesting perspective for people to talk about, and I've heard so many different. No one piece of advice is the same for everybody, so those are real good ones. So we're down to the last section here. The last section is the speed round from 1 to 10. You get to grade these 8 different topics, and 10 being the greatest, 1 being the least. So the first item is scheduling, Joe.
3.
2.
Estimating, Joe.
2.
1.
Are we going opposite here?
We're close.
No, 10 is supposed to be the most important.
Oh. Well,
So we're going the opposite.
You need to start over.
So maybe I'll start over. That should have been like so I apologize. I give you guys the wrong scale.
We start with 8, right? You said there was 8?
Yeah, there's 8. Okay. So we'll start with scheduling. 10 being the most important.
But you've only got 8 items.
Well, they could all be 10.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
On a
It's
10
not a
scale.
ranking.
All right,
Okay.
all right.
That's the first time anybody called on me. That's good. That's the first time anybody's called me on that. So go ahead.
I misunderstood your criteria there. Yeah, I'd still say scheduling's about a 7 or 8 for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say like a 9 or a 10.
And it just shows different roles, you know. Estimating, Joe.
I'd say that's also about a 7 or 8.
I would give it a 10.
Okay. Contract administration, Joe.
Again, I'm in the 7 or 8 range.
Okay.
Some of these things in my mindset there is, you can have a few things wrong with it that a 10 scale is going to have to be, this is so paramount that it's the most important thing and nothing can be wrong with it, otherwise you're dead in the water, right? And a 1 is, it really doesn't matter. This whole thing could be flawed and you could still have a successful project. But all of these are very important items, so it's difficult.
Jacob, contract administration.
Let's give it an 8.
Design.
You can adapt through the project with changes, so I'm going to say design's probably about a 7.
Okay.
I would agree.
Contracts.
If you want to stay out of court, that's a 10.
Yeah. You want to stay in business, that's 10. What do you say, Jacob?
That's an odd one too. Contracts are the sole focus in pre-con and buyout, and then they're putting a filing box or stored on your desktop, and you don't consult your contract again until there's an issue. You're trying to hold a sub accountable. So I guess I would tend to agree with Joe. It's a 9 or a 10 because it's the gospel. They are put away and forgotten once construction starts, but they are handy when you need them. They basically, if you have effective contracts in place, they keep things out of court. So they usually are black and white and lay out the law. So I would give contracts a 9 or a 10.
Accounting, Joe.
I give that a 7. It seems like it always comes down to the money.
What do you think, Jacob?
7.
Okay. Selling work.
I give that about a 6.
What do you think, Jacob?
5. I mean, and that's
Why
just,
would you guys give that one a low number? I'm just interested. A lower number than the others.
here, my opinion, here a lot of our work comes to us on reputation and past work experience and client retention.
That makes sense.
He does a lot more.
Do you have to really sell yourself into something that you might not be, or are you gaining work on?
And we're a
reputation?
little spoiled here in the fact that we have a great marketing and business development department that, they go out and win the work and then they hand it to us.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of these smaller contractors kind of have to, wear both.
Well, it sounds like you guys have a good clientele, too. So, the last one is leadership, Joe.
9.
I would give leadership a 10.
So, well, I appreciate that because I always think it's interesting to kind of get an idea. Some people think things are important, different industries, and I always like that. So to kind of close it out, I'm going to give you guys the last word. I always give whoever's sitting with me the last word. I do want to say I thank you guys for coming down. Love you guys' building, I really do. When I drove down the street, I wasn't sure I was in the right place, But then when I walked in, I was like really impressed with how your facility looks. So kudos there. And it sounds like I did a little research on your guys' company before I headed up, and it sounds like this company has been around a while and will be around a while, So especially with good people like Jacob, I tried to hire him a few years back, but he politely told me no. So,
You tried to send me to Alaska.
Yeah, I did try to send you to Alaska, but so I want to guys give you a last word. Any words of advice? Anything you'd like to say? And I'll start with Jacob because I think Joe deserves the last word.
I thank you for allowing us to be part of this. I just reiterate, self-improvement daily. Our motto here at HGC is build every day, and we apply that more so than just construction. It's in our personal lives. It's in our daily lives at home with our family. It's on the job. It's whether you're interfacing with a client or you're interfacing with a laborer or an apprentice carpenter out in the field. It's know your audience, be the best that you can be, and really try to grow those around you. Be a leader. You don't always have to have the answer, but know the answer when it's presented.
Joe, you get the last word. So
I don't know. It's going to be hard to top build every day. Scott, I do want to thank you for having us out here. I think, maybe if some of your listeners out there, Kentucky is one of the places we're looking to grow. It's a lot of your clientele and audience here that we'd love to have an opportunity to look at any projects that any folks might have down there.
Well, thank you once again, and thank you, the listener, for another edition of CONEXEC. We'll be back next week.